message by Prime Minister Modi, a message of intent, a message that will go beyond the summit in Tianjin in China. It's a message of well-being, a message for humanity and for international law-based global order. Swati Joshi joining us live from Tianjin. Swati, Prime Minister not mincing his words, calling out the terror sponsors, also the duplicity over terrorism, said SCO stands for security, connectivity, opportunity, and we must avoid an expansionist policy. So, subtle messages everywhere.
Absolutely, and this is what we've been talking about. India's objective to register its voice, its concern, its opinion on the issue of terrorism. In fact, the Prime Minister began by highlighting those concerns. He started his address of the plenary session by talking about the issue of terrorism, and most importantly, Pranesh, he did mention the Pahalgam terror attack, all in the presence of not just the SCO members, but Pakistan, that is a member state of SCO. That assumes a lot of significance. Yesterday, he spoke to Xi Jinping and asked for China's help in countering terrorism to collaborate and cooperate in a joint fight against terrorism. And today in the plenary session, the Prime Minister addresses the most important issue, which is terrorism. He also called out the hypocrisy of the nations that support terrorism, and he asked the SCO members, is this acceptable to us? Is it acceptable that a country supports terrorism? The Prime Minister also highlighted that, no country and no citizen is safe from terrorism. Terrorism is a big threat to peace and, in fact, to entire humanity, and it should be condemned and countered in all its form. He also spoke about the threat of cyber terrorism. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi, through this particular address in the plenary session, has also put out a very, very important question in front of the SCO members. Is this acceptable to us? There are countries who are supporting terrorism. It was clear what the Prime Minister and who the Prime Minister was talking about. A very strong message, I would say, from the SCO platform.
And considering that Shehbaz Sharif was, seated in that room, not very far from where he was, it's a message that will really haunt both Shehbaz Sharif and also Xi Jinping, because China, hasn't named Pakistan, and China has been supplying ammunition, weapons to Pakistan. And all of that ends up with the terrorist. How? That's for our, our viewers to figure out. It's a question of common sense. Now, let me quickly, before I play out what the Prime Minister said again, go over the panel once again for their reaction. Abhijit, you go first. What do you make of this?
He was targeting, I think, very mildly both Pakistan and China, because remember at the last summit, the defense ministers summit, Rajnath ji refused to sign the final declaration because it didn't mention Pakistani terrorism by name. I don't think we have any hopes from this summit also that will mention Pakistani terror by name or anything like that. China will see to that. That said, what is particularly stark out here is the way, because look, we're playing to the optics out here. Trump is playing optics, we're playing optics in a different way. And what's happening out here is, if you notice Modi's tweets since this morning, he has tweeted out images of him hugging and, being extremely friendly with every single leader out there bar one, and that one is Pakistan. So this is something that is coming through very, very clearly, that there is, this stage is being used as a messaging not just for America. It is also being used for China, but it is reinforcing the message with America that, if a friend like Russia, an old and trusted ally like Russia, and the global number 2, China, aren't able to together force us into even saying hello to the Pakistani Prime Minister, you've literally got no chance of being able to do this. So, it's not an Aukat mein raho kind of a message, but it's a more, I don't know the civilized way of saying Aukat mein raho, but it's a civilized way of saying Aukat mein raho.
Yeah, one gets the drift. Abhijit, Ambassador Shankar, what do you make of Prime Minister's remarks?
Well, he's emphasized security, connectivity, opportunity. continuity as the goals that SCO should pursue. He's emphasized the importance of having no double standards on terror, that you can't fight terror while simultaneously, you have members who support it. And he's also, mentioned or stated that global strengthening cooperation to fight terrorism in a united way would be important. And of course, the meetings with Xi Jinping and with President Putin, which is still to take place, will have their own significance in terms of global diplomacy and will signal at least an initiative to rebalance India's ties with the great powers without disrupting, I would say, its ties with the United States.
The Prime Minister also said some countries openly support terror. So the message is out there for people to relate to, link it to. Prabhu Dayal?
You are absolutely right. Prime Minister's message was very clear. And without naming China, he spelled it out in an indirect manner that China's support for Pakistan in the context of terrorist groups has fueled India's concerns. China and Pakistan objected to the inclusion of the TRF, or the Resistance Front, and the Lashkar-e-Taiba in a UN Security Council statement condemning the April 22 Pahalgam terror attack. And this aligns with a past pattern where China has blocked India's attempts to designate Pakistan-based terrorists and outfits under the UN's 1267 sanctions regime. So China has blocked India's proposal at the UN Security Council to ban 5 Pakistan-based terrorists who carried out terrorist acts against India. So China has been supportive of Pakistani terrorism, and Prime Minister's message was very clear for those who could read it between the lines.
And let's play out that message since we're talking about it. Then we'll ask Swati also to share her perspective on this. This is what the Prime Minister said with Xi Jinping and Shehbaz Sharif in attendance.
हमारे शानदार स्वागत और आतिथ्य सत्कार के लिए मैं राष्ट्रपति श्री का हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। आज उज्बेकिस्तान का इंडिपेंडेंस डे है, पर किर्गिस्तान का राष्ट्रीय दिवस था। इस अवसर पर मैं दोनों लीडर्स को बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले 24 वर्षों एससीओ का पूरे यूरेशिया क्षेत्र की एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली को जोड़ने में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान रहा। भारत ने एक सक्रिय सदस्य के रूप में हमेशा कंस्ट्रक्टिव और सकारात्मक भूमिका निभाई है। एससीओ को लेकर भारत की सोच और नीति 3 मुख्य स्तंभों पर आधारित है। SCO, S सिक्योरिटी, C कनेक्टिविटी, O अपॉर्चुनिटी। पहले स्तंभ S यानी सिक्योरिटी के संदर्भ में मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि सुरक्षा, शांति और स्थिरता किसी भी देश के विकास का आधार है। किंतु इस मार्ग में आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद और अतिवाद बड़ी चुनौतियां आतंकवाद से किसी देश की सुरक्षा ही नहीं बल्कि पूरी मानवता के लिए एक साझा चुनौती है। कोई देश, कोई समाज, कोई नागरिक अपने आप को इससे सुरक्षित नहीं समझ सकता। इसलिए आतंकवाद से लड़ाई में भारत ने एकजुटता पर बल दिया। इसमें SCO की बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही। इस वक्त भारत ने जॉइंट इंफॉर्मेशन ऑपरेशन को लीड करते हुए अल-कायदा और इससे जुड़े आतंकी संगठनों से लड़ने का इनिशिएटिव किया। हमने रेडियोलाइजेशन के विरुद्ध समन्वय बढ़ाने और मिलकर कदम उठाने का भी प्रस्ताव रखा। टेरर फाइनेंसिंग के खिलाफ आवाज उठाई। इसमें मेरे समर्थन के लिए मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, भारत पिछले 4 दशकों से निर्मम आतंकवाद का दंश झेल रहा है। कितनी ही माताओं ने अपने बच्चे खोए और कितने बच्चे अनाथ हुए। हाल ही में हमने पहलगाम में टेररिज्म का बहुत ही घिनौना रूप देखा। इस दुख की घड़ी में जो मित्र देश हमारे साथ खड़े रहे, मैं उनका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। यह हमला केवल भारत की अंतरात्मा पर भी आघात नहीं था, यह मानवता में विश्वास रखने वाले हर देश, हर व्यक्ति को खुली चुनौती थी। ऐसे में प्रश्न उठना स्वाभाविक है, क्या कुछ देशों द्वारा आतंकवाद का खुलेआम समर्थन हमें स्वीकार्य हो सकता है? एक्सेलेंसी, हमें स्पष्ट रूप से और एक स्वर कहना होगा कि आतंकवाद पर कोई भी डबल स्टैंडर्ड स्वीकार्य नहीं होंगे। हमें मिलकर आतंकवाद का हर रंग में, हर रूप में विरोध करना, ये मानवता के प्रति हमारा दायित्व है। एक्सेलेंसी, अब मैं दूसरे स्तंभ सी यानी कनेक्टिविटी पर अपने विचार रखना चाहूंगा। भारत का हमेशा से मत रहा है कि मजबूत कनेक्टिविटी से केवल व्यापार ही नहीं बल्कि विश्वास और विकास के द्वार भी खुलते हैं। इसी सोच के साथ हम जवाहर पोर्ट और इंटरनेशनल नॉर्थ साउथ ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉरिडोर जैसे इनिशिएटिव पर काम कर रहे हैं। इनसे हम अफगानिस्तान और मध्य एशिया के साथ संपर्क बढ़ा सकते हैं। हमारा मानना है कि कनेक्टिविटी के हर प्रयास में संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता का सम्मान होना चाहिए। यही SCO चार्टर के मूल सिद्धांतों में भी विदित है। Connectivity that bypasses sovereignty, losing trust and unity. Excellency, तीसरा स्तंभ है O, यानी opportunity. Opportunity for cooperation and reform. 2023 में भारत की अध्यक्षता के दौरान नई ऊर्जा और विचारों का संचार हुआ। स्टार्टअप और इनोवेशन, ट्रेडिशनल मेडिसिन, यूथ एम्पावरमेंट, डिजिटल इंक्लूजन और शायद बुद्धिस्ट हेरिटेज जैसे नए विषयों को अपने सहयोग से जोड़ा। हमारा प्रयास था कि एससीओ को सरकारों के परे भी ले जाए, सामान्य मानवी, यंग साइंटिस्ट, स्कॉलर और स्टार्टअप को भी आपस में जोड़े। हमारे पीपल टू पीपल टाइम से दृढ़ता देने के लिए मैं आज एक और सुझाव रखना चाहता हूं। एससीओ के अंदर एक सिविलाइजेशन डायलॉग फोरम बनाया जाए। इससे हम अपनी प्राचीन सभ्यताओं, कला, साहित्य और परंपराओं को वैश्विक मंच पर साझा कर सकते हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, आज भारत रिफॉर्म, परफॉर्म, ट्रांसफॉर्म के मूल मंत्र पर आगे बढ़ रहा है। कोविड हो या वैश्विक आर्थिक अस्थिरता, हमने हर चुनौती को अवसर में बदलने का प्रयास किया। हम लगातार वाइड रेंजिंग रिफॉर्म पर काम कर रहे हैं। इस देश में विकास के साथ साथ अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सहयोग के लिए भी नए अवसर खुल रहे हैं। मैं आप सभी को भारत की विकास यात्रा से जुड़ने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, यह खुशी की बात है कि एससीओ भी समय के अनुरूप इवॉल्व हो रहा है। ऑर्गेनाइज्ड क्राइम, ड्रग ट्रैफिकिंग और साइबर सिक्योरिटी जैसे समकालीन चुनौतियों से निपटने के लिए 4 नए केंद्र बनाए जा रहे हैं। हम इस रिफॉर्म ओरिएंटेड माइंडसेट का स्वागत करते हैं। वैश्विक संस्थानों रिफॉर्म के लिए एससीओ सदस्य आपसी सहयोग बढ़ा सकते हैं। संयुक्त राष्ट्र की 80वीं वर्षगांठ के अवसर पर हम एकमत होकर यूएन रिफॉर्म का आह्वान कर सकते हैं। ग्लोबल साउथ की आकांक्षाओं को आउटडेटेड फ्रेमवर्क में कैद रखना भावी पीढ़ियों के प्रति घोर अन्याय है। नई पीढ़ी के बहुरंगी सपनों हम पुराने जमाने की ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट स्क्रीन पर नहीं दिखा सकते। स्क्रीन बदलने की होगी। एससीओ मल्टीलेटरलिज्म और इंक्लूसिव वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर का मार्गदर्शक बन सकता है। मुझे खुशी है कि इस महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर आज एक स्टेटमेंट जारी किया जा रहा है। एक्सेलेंसी, हम सभी पार्टनर्स के साथ समन्वय और सहयोग के साथ आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। मैं एससीओ के अगले अध्यक्ष किर्गिस्तान के राष्ट्रपति और मेरे मित्र प्रेसिडेंट जपारोव को शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Prime Minister Modi not mincing his words, sending a message to Donald Trump by saying that, look, in the fight against terror, when it came to isolating Al-Qaeda, India was at the forefront. This he said in presence of Xi Jinping and Shehbaz Sharif, who was also seated at the table. Then an indirect message, a subtle message to Beijing that stop your double standards on terror. And obviously calling out Pakistan for its involvement in the Pahalgam terror attacks. Srinjoy Chaudhary back with us. Swati Joshi joining us live from Tianjin. Swati, the Prime Minister said everything that needed to be said in the manner in which it was required.
Absolutely. The Prime Minister highlighted how India has been bearing the brunt of terrorism for the last 4 decades, and he asked the member nations, are you going to stand with us in this fight against terrorism, when he urged all to come together to counter the issues of terrorism, extremism and separatism. And most importantly, he said that we saw the worst form of terrorism when the Pahalgam attack took place. That was the defining moment. To say that, to talk about cross-border terrorism and Pahalgam, because we know that Pakistan is behind the Pahalgam terror attack, in front of the Pakistani Prime Minister, in front of China, who is the all-weather friend of Pakistan, in front of all the members of the SCO, was the defining moment, Pranesh, I would say. And, you know, this is very important because the Prime Minister asked the member nations, he's put the ball in their court. He's asking them, you tell us, is this acceptable to you that a country or countries openly support terrorism? And there can be both, you know, direct and indirect type of support. One is the direct involvement, direct support that we see Pakistan doing, and the indirect support is whoever, of course, helps Pakistan in hiding that, or whoever helps Pakistan in emboldening that, and which is China. So a subtle dig at China, but a direct attack on Pakistan on the issue of terrorism.
Sushant Sareen, Brahma Chalani also joining the broadcast. Mr. Chalani, what do you think of this message that the Prime Minister has delivered with Shehbaz Sharif in the room?
It's a powerful message delivered from Chinese soil, mentioning Pahalgam, which China has sought to obscure that massacre. And that stands in stark contrast to the way China quickly and forthrightly condemned the Moscow concert hall attack in March 2024. But when that attack in Moscow killed more than 150 people, it was quite a massacre. But when the massacre in Pahalgam occurred, China implicitly sought to shield Pakistan. And for Modi to deliver this statement from Chinese soil is very important, because we don't know what will come out from a joint declaration. Maybe there might be no joint declaration, because if there's no consensus at the SCO Summit, or if India puts its foot down, if they try to release an anodyne statement that has very little on terrorism, India could exercise its veto. After all, in the SCO, every member state has effectively a veto. So we don't know whether a declaration will emerge from the SCO Summit, or in the absence of a declaration, there might be a chairman's statement. You know, when there is no consensus, then the chairman, that is the host country, will issue a statement. But irrespective of that, I think the symbolism of Modi making it very plain from Chinese soil about India's fight against terrorism. Unfortunately, at the moment, both China and the US are shielding Pakistan. So India is facing a double-pronged challenge from two ends: attempt to obscure Pakistan's role in nurturing a state infrastructure that exports terrorism to its neighbors, particularly to India. But it's important for India, nonetheless, to keep the spotlight on terrorism, because that is the core issue for India's regional security, especially in relation to Pakistan. Unfortunately, at the global level, the war on terror stands derailed because of double standards by countries like China and the US. As you all know, that the US has embraced the jihadist new president in Syria. The whole Syrian regime comprises a jihadist army that has taken over that country.
You're right, and Trump called him bright young man. Someone who was sanctioned by the US is now in the good books of, or like Navarro said, is in bed with Trump. Sushant Sareen, what do you make of? There's so much to, talk to you. We'll get to Navarro, but I want to know what you make of what Prime Minister has said.
Look, I think in some ways, whatever he said was what was being expected. affected. He touched on all the hot button items which affect India, and to that extent, that's good. Again, I think for us, it's a bit of a trap, Pranesh. That's the way I look at it. People are free to oppose me on that. Yes, I completely agree with the fact that terrorism is one of the most fundamental security issues confronting India, and also because it's state-sponsored terrorism. It's a terrorism which is being foisted on India from a state with an ideology, with a very pernicious ideology, an ideology which is represented not just by its so-called or its de facto dictator, the army chief, but also by the fact that the Pakistani state has given a free hand to these terror groups. And we are seeing evidence of that on the ground in Pakistan, where the Lashkar-e-Taiba and some of these other groups are involved in the so-called flood relief activity. There is enough footage of that, which means that these organizations, which the Pakistanis claimed have been bottled up, are enjoying impunity. So yes, when the Prime Minister flags this issue out, that's a good thing. When he talks about Pahalgam, that's a good thing. Because if anybody thinks that, provocation in the region can lead to some kind of a nuclear flashpoint, then that provocation is not coming from India. That's coming from Pakistan. The problem, or to some extent my dilemma, is that, we don't want to be hyphenated with a terrorist state like Pakistan. But when we flag this issue with so much of emphasis in international forums, and I understand why we do it, but somewhere along the line we tend to, hyphenate ourselves with Pakistan. Because even our discussion right now, Pranesh, is focused on this particular aspect. Frankly, Pakistan doesn't add up to anything for us, economically, politically, or any which way. If Pakistan did not have its nuisance value, it has no value for India. We can do without Pakistan. We can very simply turn our back on Pakistan and pretend it does not exist, that the Arabian Sea is the Pakistan Sea, and that Pakistan is in the Arabian Sea and that nothing exists out there. It doesn't add up to anything for us, right? And yet, when we keep talking about it, we somehow equate ourselves with these fellows. I don't know why we would want to do that. Because the Prime Minister also said on a lot of other things which are of even greater importance to us in terms of our future, in terms of not just our foreign policy, but in terms of our economic policy. And I think those are the issues on which we need to really focus on. Those are the issues on which we really need to double down. Because let's face it, Pranesh, let's be realistic. We can say whatever we want to say. Again, I agree that saying what we said in Beijing has a different meaning altogether. But at the end of the day, it's water off a duck's back. You think anybody can rid the Pakistanis out of their terrorism addiction? Do you think countries will stop supporting Pakistan simply because we are saying this in Beijing? Countries will make their own calculations. They will have their own interests, which they will try and back. And to that extent, we need to be realistic about what is possible and what is not possible in these meetings. And to that extent, I think we should be pushing, making a greater push to issues on which we can get what we want. And finally, I would imagine, I am probably not as, apprehensive as, I don't know if apprehensive is the right word, or skeptical as Brahma is, on a joint statement. I think a statement will come out. It probably would be a kind of a watered down thing. I don't think there will be any naming and shaming of any country. But I would imagine that a statement would come out, because that is how the geopolitics is arranged at this point in time. I would be surprised if there was nothing coming out. Maybe on things like BRI, on which India has still not signed out, we will probably not become part of it, like we haven't in other SCO summits and declarations. But I think on by and large on other things, we'll pretty much sign on whatever is agreed.
You're right. This statement, for whatever it is worth, will come out because countries at the end of the day want to say the right things even if they don't practice it in reality. So you're right about that. But yeah, and I agree with you that there should be no hyphenation, and there is no intent to hyphenate India and Pakistan. Whatever discussion that we're having, Sushant Sareen, or we've had in the past, is only to call out the rogue nation that Pakistan is. But having said that, I wanted to get your views on Mr. Peter Navarro's rant. But before that, Dmitry Babic is a senior journalist now joining us. He's been listening to this conversation intently. Mr. Babic, good morning. Thank you for joining us on Times Now. Putin and Modi have shared a hug, handshake, smiles. This will only mean that Trump imposes more sanctions on India.
Well, putting aside the huge issue of the Ukrainian war, which is a big tragedy for us, and there is a big variety of views on it in Russia. But what Mr. Trump did, connecting the Ukrainian war and the tariffs on Indian goods, was simply illegal. I mean, America was in its full right to impose sanctions on Russia, prohibiting its own companies to trade with Russia, even though this is also very dangerous. For example, America supplied us, they sold us Boeing, airplanes, air jets, and now they are not supplying spare parts for Boeing. This is simply dangerous and cruel, because a disaster can happen. But okay, America was in its right to impose sanctions, using its own companies. But when America uses the so-called secondary sanctions, prohibiting the sovereign nations, such as India, to buy Russian oil or other Russian goods, this is simply not legal. India is a sovereign country. It can decide by itself where to buy its oil, with whom to trade, and no other country, including the United States, can dictate to India how it should behave in international affairs and in international economics.